Next, the folks from True North are going to talk about everybody's favorite fish, salmon. I'm sure everyone's got a bunch of questions, and hopefully we can get them answered. And I think they're going to throw hats and T-shirts out of a cannon at some point.
First they catch that, ask the first question.
Got to answer the first question, Larson.
There is a test. Oh, for different computer. Just double click on it.
All right. Oh, you got lots of things in my hands. Okay, I'm Andrew Lively. I'm with, as Michael mentioned, or Richard mentioned, that I'm with True North Salmon Company. So I'm with Cook Aquaculture, and we have two brands, True North Salmon Company and Heritage Salmon. And I'm going to talk a little bit about both of those brands here today. Catherine McClatchy is here with me as well. Catherine is our sales representative in the Texas area, so if you have any detailed questions, Catherine's going to be around for the next day or so answering questions and going out to see some people. So a little bit about Cook Aquaculture, True North Salmon, Heritage Salmon. We raise Atlantic salmon. We started doing this about 27 years ago, and we raise Atlantic salmon in the Gulf of Maine, the Bay of Fundy, and I'm going to show you a map for any of the people that are geography majors where that is, and I'll show you we also have operations in Chile as well. We say that we are the only producer we say it because it's true, the only producer in North America that raises salmon from egg to plate. We control the entire process from the salmon egg right up to the plate. We even have trucks that deliver the fish fresh around North America. How did we start? It was interesting. I was here a couple of months ago meeting with Brad and Richard, and sort of the Fruge story that I heard kind of sounds a lot like our story. We started in 1985 with 3 employees, Gifford, Michael, and Glenn Cook, who are from New Brunswick, which is, I don't know your family history, but I bet you there's Fruges from New Brunswick. The Acadians were definitely from our area. They started 27 years ago, and I gotta tell you, they were kooks out there gonna raise salmon in the ocean. And they started with 5,000 fish. They hand-built their own wooden pens. They put the 5,000 fish in the water, and 18 months later, they had 5,000 18 to 20-pound fish, and it worked. And now we have 2,800 employees worldwide. We are the largest Atlantic salmon aquaculture company in North America. We're the longest operating aquaculture company in North America. We have operations in Canada, United States. We're the only Atlantic salmon operator in the United States, in Chile, and we also do sea bream and sea bass in Spain. We're also on Undercover Boss. Have you guys ever seen the show Undercover Boss? I'll give you a little bit of a forewarning, Michael. If you're ever on Undercover Boss, it doesn't always work out the way you want it to. The story with Glenn Cook when he was on Undercover Boss is that he was, do everybody know what I'm talking about when I say Undercover Boss, the show Undercover Boss? He was on Undercover Boss and he was going out to the site, and the story is why there's this film crew is that he's an unemployed lumber worker making a career change into aquaculture. And as I told you, he did every job in the company 27 years. He was out on one of the sites and the guy asked him to pull, a 19-pound fish out of the water. And when he pulled the fish out of the water and knew how, when you hold a big salmon, you have to hold on to his tail really tight. It kind of pinches a nerve in him so he doesn't jump around. When he did that and didn't have any problems, the guy said, this isn't the first salmon this guy's held on to. But anyway, it all worked out very well. He wasn't able to fix a motor that he was supposed to be able to fix. Anyway, it was a good experience for us all, and that just aired 2 weeks ago, and it'll be on Undercover Boss International shortly. I don't have the date, but I'll give you the date when it's on. So we have for our True North operation. So as I said, all of our Atlantic salmon from the Gulf of Maine, Bay of Fundy is the True North brand. We have about 100 saltwater sites in the Northeast. We only use about 60 to 70 of those sites. We have a crop rotation system, the same as you do with your crawfish. We have fish on the site for 18 months. After we harvest the fish, we let it fallow for a year. We're doing the same thing. We have a 3-year crop rotation cycle with all of our sites. We've applied the same technology to Chile. We're the only ones that are doing this in Chile. We control the hatcheries, the freshwater phase. We have sites hatcheries in New Brunswick, Maine, Nova Scotia, and Newfoundland. And we have processing facilities in Maine, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, Prince Edward Island. Where the heck is this guy talking about? So this is the area where we operate here. So this is the state of Maine here. And this is the province of Nova Scotia, province of New Brunswick. This area here is the Bay of Fundy, and this area all around here is the Gulf of Maine. Why did we start there? Why did we go there? Does anybody know why? Who caught the hat? Why did we start in the Bay of Fundy? If he doesn't answer, somebody else gets a hat.
Best place to grow salmon.
Highest tides in the world. Tides in the Bay of Fundy go up and down 30 feet. But you get to keep your hat, don't you? You got the right answer. Tides go up and down 30 feet twice a day in the Bay of Fundy, the Gulf of Maine. I'm a guy, I don't know measurements that well, but it's probably about twice as high as this building. The tide comes in and out. Twice that amount every day, 2 times a day. So we've got clean, cold, fast-flowing water in our area. That means that the temperature doesn't fluctuate that much, and it also means that the temperature, the water is clean and moving all the time, so the salmon are swimming all the time. Best place in the world to raise salmon. We also have now moved into heritage salmon. Where did we go? We moved away from the crowd. We aren't at the end of the world, but you can almost see it from where we are in Chile. We are at the very, very southern tip of Chile. We've gone down there. We are further away from all the other main processors in Chile. Why are we down there? Clean, cold water. We don't have the tides down there, but we do certainly have the currents down there. They don't have the tides as great as we do. And the other thing that we have down there is very low salinity levels. We are right beside a glacier. It is cold. We are right beside a glacier, and the glacier actually reduces the salinity of the water, which makes it an excellent growing condition for our operations, for our Atlantic salmon. So we are at the very, very southern tip of Chile, and that's where we produce our heritage salmon. Fruge buys both heritage and true north salmon. So a little bit about this salmon. What is this fish that we're talking about here? Is anybody here not eaten Atlantic salmon? Get a hat if you haven't eaten Atlantic salmon, I'll get you some salmon. Everybody's had Atlantic salmon before? So what is it about this fish? So Salmo salar is the Latin name for Atlantic salmon. Why do they call it Salmo salar? Salmo salar means the leaper. One of the unique characteristics of Atlantic salmon is that they jump. And, you know, all the other wonderful fish that the first guy was talking about, none of them jump out of the water. And that's something kind of unique about Atlantic salmon. So they're called the leaper fish. And Atlantic salmon has been a prized fish in our culture for many, many, many years. This is a fish that was in our rivers and streams all up and down the East Coast, and I'll show you a little bit of a map after this one. It was in our rivers and streams for thousands and thousands of years, for 20,000 years. I've got a slide for every year. I had a professor that told me the mind can only absorb, but the rear end it can endure. So I'll try to get through this as quickly as I possibly can. But this is a little bit of poetry. I mean, there's been lots of poetry written about the mystique of Atlantic salmon. Atlantic salmon has been considered one of the prize food items for the North American culture, the European culture, the Native American culture. This has been a product that we've eaten, that we've consumed for thousands of years. And where did Atlantic salmon come from? We had Atlantic salmon as far south as the Hudson River in New York City. Atlantic salmon existed. Far south as Spain, that was where Atlantic salmon existed. All along the coast of eastern North America and the Western Europe, sorry. What do Atlantic salmon do? They start out in freshwater rivers. They're anadromatous. I got an extra A in there. That means that they start out in freshwater rivers and streams. They swim out to sea. They eat the krill off the bottom of the ice, and they come back to the same river where they started. One of the unique characteristics of Atlantic salmon is that they don't die when they do that. They can do that year after year. We've got records of Atlantic salmon. We're looking after restocking of a few rivers in our area. We have records of Atlantic salmon that have come back 12 times after their life at sea. But why don't we have Atlantic salmon in all these areas now? What did we do? We dammed up all those rivers. All of those rivers make great hydroelectric dams. And the Connecticut River has 11 hydroelectric dams on them. And we built all the salmon ladders that we could, but when the salmon come back down those rivers and go through those turbines, there was nothing that we could do about it. So we lost our wild commercial Atlantic salmon fishery around 1960. It really started to decline in 1945, but it ended around 1960. There is no commercial Atlantic salmon fishery anywhere in the world. The only way you can get Atlantic salmon now wild is with a fly rod. And as I say, we are responsible for restocking some of those rivers. You'll see in Undercover Boss that Glenn is a big fly fisherman, so he's very keen on that. So this is a little bit of the life cycle of Atlantic salmon. They start out in the rivers and streams in the wild. They start out in the rivers and streams because they don't have a dam on them. They spawn in the rivers and streams. They spend some time in the rivers and streams. Depends on the temperature of the water, how long they spend in the rivers and streams. Then they swim out to sea when they get to the smolt stage. That's when their gills are ready to go into salt water. They swim out to the sea, and then they come back and go through that whole cycle. So in our system, we have to replicate that entire cycle. So up on the upper left-hand side, that's our hatchery. So that's got 10,000 eggs in it. And the little tag in the upper, do I have a laser in this thing? Tag in the upper right-hand side, that's mom and dad's name. We are the only company in the world that have DNA traceability. We put that little tag on every group of fish that goes through our entire system. But also we know the DNA of every fish that goes through our system as well. We're the only company in the world that does that. Then they go through the alvean phase, and then down the lower right is the par phase. Marketing guy, got to show a graph, market share. So what are we talking about here? Why are we talking about Atlantic salmon? Atlantic salmon represents, in this graph, what does it say? 38% of your total fin fish sales at retail in the United States of America. It is the #1 selling product at seafood counters. And it is growing. This graph shows that it's growing at 30%, whereas the total category is only growing at 6.9%. It is a rapidly growing category. And if you don't have it in your restaurants, if you don't have it in your stores, you should have it in your stores. It is the biggest selling item that you can have in your stores. You need to have a variety at your stores, and that's why you should carry all the other stuff that these guys are talking about. But this is the anchor product that you've got to have in your store. But you absolutely need to have variety. I was told I was allowed to use beer analogies. You can have different varieties of beer. You can't have just one variety of beer in your restaurant. You can have a dark beer, you can have a light beer, but you need to have variety. But you need to have the #1 selling item in your store as well, or in your restaurant. Why are people buying Atlantic salmon? Because Dr. Oz and Oprah told them to. It has the highest omega-3s. Everybody's talking about omega-3s. Does anybody not know it? I'll throw a hat out. Better be able to answer the question. Who's know what what omega-3s is? What's an omega-3? What are omega-3s?
It's an oil that contains vitamin E.
Yep. Well, it doesn't contain vitamin E. It's in oil. And the most proven benefit of omega-3s is the reduction of coronary heart disease. There's all kinds of other things that are associated with omega-3s. Reduction of Alzheimer's, improved joint health, better brain development in young children. But as you can see from this chart, omega-3s in Atlantic salmon are some of the highest you can get. Mackerel has a little bit of a higher level, but some of the other things don't have the omega-3s that we have. On the right-hand side, I've got a graph of the wild salmon, the amounts of omega-3s in wild salmon. Atlantic salmon and king salmon, or Chinook salmon, have the two highest. Chum, pink, coho, sockeye don't have the same levels. So, and I'll talk a little bit about some of those other species as well. Other things that you can get omega-3s from, you can get omega-3s from flaxseed, you can get omega-3s from walnuts. You gotta eat about a bathtub full of that stuff to get the amount of omega-3s that you get from Atlantic salmon. Where's our competition? Richard asked me to talk a little bit about where supply is coming from. We are seeing Atlantic salmon being processed in all kinds of different places around the world. And this is a little bit of a graph to show some of the Atlantic salmon production. What we've seen around 2009, 2010, the production of Atlantic salmon went down a little bit. That was primarily in Chile. They were having a lot of problems with a disease called ISA in Chile. And we were able to avoid that with our operations in Chile. The big thing is that you've got to run your operations in as clean a manner as you possibly can. You got to have reduce the amount of stress on your salmon for their life. As long as they're in low stress and they're getting the best possible food they possibly can, they're not going to get sick. It's basic. It's expensive, but that's the way you have to do it. You have to treat them and give them the best possible environment they can. We sell by the pound. We want them to get big. We want them to have the best possible environment they have. The idea of throwing a whole bunch of fish in one area and thinking they're going to survive with Atlantic salmon doesn't work. They're very, very high up the food chain when it comes to species that are in the water. They know what they're doing, and they know when it's not the right environment, and they get sick. Here's some of the production around the world. Norway, you can see, is by far the largest producer. Their primary market is Asia and Europe for Norwegian salmon. They do sell a little bit in the United States. Iceland was in it for a little while, they're out a little bit. You can see Canadian and American production. That would be primarily us. And then you can see Chile is starting to come back a little bit as well. They're doing Atlantic salmon aquaculture in Australia now too, in Tasmania. So our salmon, as we say, the heritage salmon that we supply to Fruge from a fresh, pristine fjord in southern Chile, and we are the largest, longest operating aquaculture company in North America. We sell portions. We also sell frozen product. We're not selling any frozen product to Fruge yet. There's also been a little bit of a talk. People talk a lot about farm versus wild. Why, should we have farm salmon? Should we have wild salmon? We don't really talk about that anymore. We think that today you can have a Granny Smith apple, tomorrow you can have a Macintosh apple. They taste different. A farm salmon and a sockeye salmon taste different. They both are good. You should eat more apples, you should eat more salmon. You should have more variety on your menu. So I'm not opposed to people buying wild salmon. You should be buying wild salmon. You should be buying Atlantic salmon. You should have different varieties on your menu. So again, I jumped ahead. So yeah, case for aquaculture. The demand is growing, but the other thing with aquaculture is that people can get into arguments whether the world population is going to double in 25 years or 35 years or whatever it is. The result is the world population is growing, and aquaculture is one of the best ways to feed the planet. The feed conversion ratio for Atlantic salmon is about 1-to-1. Atlantic salmon are cold-blooded. They don't use a lot of energy to heat and cool themselves. They don't use any energy to heat and cool themselves. They are in a gravity-neutral environment. They don't have to stand up. They don't have to sit down. So all of their energy gets converted into protein, high omega-3 proteins. And if we're going to feed our planet, this is really the way that we're going to have to do it. This is the future. The feed conversion ratio for a cow is 8 to 10 pounds to 1. If we're going to eat, if we're going to feed ourselves, this is the way that we're going to have to do it. So there, just so I know what this next slide. So how do I increase profits? One of the questions that was on the invitation, that there's such a great crowd that came here tonight, and thank you for inviting me, and thank you all for coming. How do I increase profits with my Atlantic salmon? We've done training with about 2,500 people all over America, with educating them on Atlantic salmon. And how do they increase their profits? How do they increase their sales? They educate your staff. Just as they were saying that you need to know the Fruge story, just as you need to know the Louisiana story about how the quality of the food from Louisiana, you need to tell your people about the quality of your Atlantic salmon too. The more confidence that you can give your people in the quality of the product that you're serving, the more they're going to be able to sell it, and the more profit you're going to be able to make from it. That's the number one thing that you can do. The number one source of information for the seafood buyer is your staff. So the more information you can give your staff about the product, the more money you're going to make. The level of consumption of seafood in America is tiny. When we compare ourselves, I'll go back to beer or hot dogs or anything like that, there's so much growth that we have available to us in seafood. But people are afraid. They don't know what to buy. They don't know how to buy. The more you can educate your staff on how the quality of the product that you're buying, whether it's True North or whether it's Heritage Salmon, the more you can give them confidence they're buying the best brand that they can possibly buy, and that Fruge has done the research on the brand, the more you're going to be able to save your profit. So if you want to sell more seafood tomorrow, the key is to come to places like this and then impart some of that wisdom to your staff. The other thing is, Fruge's got it all figured out. Buy fresh. The more you can buy fresh product, the less shrink you're going to have. The more you can buy product from companies that deliver fresh to Fruge directly, there's no middleman between Fruge and us, you're going to have less shrink. And promote the brand. What did I forget? Oh. So why do you need to promote your brand? We did a little marketing guy had to do more research. 63% consumers are more likely to choose a branded Atlantic salmon versus an unbranded salmon. Who's going to go out and buy a Fisher-Price microwave, an unbranded microwave, or a whatever brand you want to put on a microwave? Who's going to buy unbranded tires versus branded tires for your vehicle? People look for brands to know the quality. 63% of consumers are more likely to buy a branded product versus an unbranded product. So the more you can let your people know that you have Heritage or True North branded product in your restaurant or in your store, the more likely they are to buy. 64% are more likely to choose a brand with a North American name on it. Guess what name we put on our product. And 85% are willing to pay a premium for it. So if you want to know how to make more money, push the brand, educate people on the brand, whether it's Louisiana or True North or Heritage. And the other thing was we do salmon academies. We did seven academies this year, which wasn't a great idea. We were supposed to do 3. We did 7 salmon academies, so I'd like to invite any of you, if you ever want to come to a salmon academy, we'll bring you up, take you out, show you around to any of our sites, and you can learn more about Atlantic salmon. And that's it. And so what do we have? So promoting on kits, thank you, Catherine. We have kits in the back here as well. So you can see we have these pop-up banners here. You've got recipe cards on your table with a little bit of information. We've got the dividers that you can put into your restaurant. We've got some kits, I think we've got 20 or so kits here. If you want to take a kit and bring it back to your place of business, they're here in the back. Take them. And as I said, that's how you're going to increase your profits. That's how you're going to increase your sales. When you let your people know, let your customers know, I know where my salmon comes from, I know where my fish comes from. You will increase your profits, you will increase your sales. That's it.